Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, reacting to some news coming out of the Toronto Raptors camp. Riker, apparently we are in the trade market for a potential playmaker to pair alongside Kyle Lowry now that he's been in and out of the lineup. Obviously, about a week ago now, we got news that he's had some chronic back issues, which, that don't go away very quickly. So to get some insurance, the Toronto Raptors are looking for some playmakers. Obviously, we made a video on Bradley Beal already, and then the potential for trading for him. But there's some smaller names that have been rumored and linked to the Toronto Raptors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it might come as a bit of a shock, or, you're a bit taken aback, especially with the Raptors having so much depth. Fred VanVleet, DeLon Wright, just got Lorenzo Brown. This podcast is probably going to come after it, so you already know about that. But it makes sense. The rumor is circulating because the Raptors are only 9-8 since Lowry's injury, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a lead to concern. Obviously, Lowry being the second playmaker of the team, that they want a guy that's more, I guess, adept at handling pick and rolls, or just setting up the offense and getting allowing the other players like Siakam and Norman Powell to set up and to inspire them off the bench. So it makes sense, and you can bring us through, I guess, the potential trades that have been rumored that the Raptors are pursuing.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned it. The Toronto Raptors, we look abysmal when we don't have a point guard really running the show. Now, Fred has picked up the slack of that in the past few games, but during our big 8-8 stretch where we were losing games left, right, and center, the big issue was the point guards not being able to facilitate the ball to our centers and big men and get everyone involved. And everyone was struggling. The team was looking bad. So, yeah, the names that have been rumored and linked to the team have been Jeff Teague, J.J. Barea, Devin Harris, as well as Jeremy Lin. For, maybe not starting at one time, maybe starting point guards in the league, but Jeff Teague currently starts on his roster. But guys that can definitely facilitate and, do what we need as Toronto Raptors with Lowry not consistently in the lineup.
Yeah, and it's interesting. These guys, most of them, or I guess two of them, big contracts. Two of them very small contracts. We'll first get into, I guess, really who is the expendable piece here when going for this interesting type trade. Are we looking to do a one-for-one or like a package deal with one of our backup point guards like Fred VanVleet or DeLon Wright? Or are we trying to get rid of players that, have been kind of criticized throughout the season by us, of course, and fans, such as like Serge Ibaka on an off night, or CJ Miles with his big contract? There's really probably not any market for him unless he's with a desirable player. But if you're looking at a player like J.J. Barea or Devin Harris, who have those small $2-3 million contracts, who is it that we're trying to get rid of here?
Yeah, well, I definitely don't want to see us get rid of Serge. Serge has been awesome this season. But guys like CJ and DeLon Wright, who's really struggled. He had a solid game against the Pacers, but for most of the season, it's been kind of disappointing. And if DeLon Wright was capable of being that facilitator like he was last season, and handling the off-ball duties, and when Fred's in the starting lineup, holding the backup point guard, because the bench thrives when there's a point guard leading the show. If DeLon was capable of doing that this season, then these rumors wouldn't be out here. But he's really struggled in that area, so I think it would have to be DeLon in the trade, because CJ doesn't have much value. Maybe Norm, but he's been playing very well as of late. So it'll be interesting to see, and it varies depending on the player. So we'll break down the players, but player by player basis. We'll look at the two Mavs guys right now, J.J. Barea and Devin Harris. Would you, because they both have similar smaller contracts, would you like for us to make a move for either of them?
Not really. I don't see where the advantage is. J.J. Barea, Devin Harris, 34 and 35 respectively. Of course, taking on a small contract is never a bad thing, but I don't understand what these guys bring to the table that's significantly better, even equivalent to what DeLon Wright can do. Of course, he hasn't found his complete place or footing yet, but his IQ is relatively high and getting better. His athleticism is always apparent. His ability, such as the last game, to really have some creative moves. J.J. Barea has been really a centerpiece for the Dallas Mavericks coming off the bench. He's always been a guy that's willing to step up to big shots, but he's tiny. I mean, he's a small player, and I don't think that he's even an improvement upon Fred VanVleet on an off night. And that's he's going to get his points. He's what is he averaging this season? Probably
J.J. Barea's current averages are 10 points per game on 20 minutes per game. So and
6 assists, and he's those are good. That's a good stat line. right? But do you really see him fitting with the Toronto Raptors? Answer is I don't, and you can have the rebuttal to that. And Devin Harris, to me, is the least intriguing player out of the four that you mentioned. He's the oldest player. He has the lowest stats. He has the least amount of upside. He has the least amount of athleticism. I don't see how bringing a player like him would be better than any of the guys that we have right now on the roster.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree 100%. Devin Harris, I wouldn't really be attracted to him. I'd much rather have a struggling DeLon Wright on the roster. And, you could even make a debate for CJ Miles over DeLon, just because of positioning-wise, over Devin Harris. He really doesn't... Ever since about 4 or 5 years ago, he's really fallen out of the league and bounced around from team to team, has really struggled. So, I wouldn't be a big fan of having Devin Harris in here, but JJ Barea is a guy that I think is still a very talented guy and wouldn't mind having him on the roster. If we did get him, I wouldn't be frustrated as, value-wise, I think he might be one of the better players listed, but him paired with Fred VanVleet, because JJ Barea would get minutes on this team. He's not good enough. He's not bad enough to throw in a Lorenzo Brown position and not play him on certain nights. And him and Fred play very similar games. JJ Barea is much older now, so he's not quite as effective as Fred, despite, in the past he's had some very strong seasons. But 10 points per game, 6 assists. He'd provide production, but having 2 miniature point guards coming off the bench that really do the same sorts of things, I don't really see the fit with this team.
No, absolutely. And what is the trade supposed to be? If you're getting a player of this value, you're trading a player of that same value. So you're doing basically a 1-for-1 trade with him and DeLon Wright. Where's the incentive for the Dallas Mavericks? If anything, their management office is saying the exact same thing. Oh, we're going to get rid of a guy who's a proven veteran for us for a guy who has, a bit of upside, but it's been struggling lately. I think both teams would look at this and be like, there has to be another piece incorporated into that. And then now we're just getting into some super hypotheticals when really it makes more sense for the Toronto Raptors to put in a bunch of chips going after Bradley Beal instead of putting in another player to sweeten the, a Dallas Mavericks trade for JJ Barea.
Yeah,
I don't see it happening.
Most definitely. I 100% agree. The next guy would be that's interesting is Jeff Teague. Jeff Teague, he's been established. He's an all-star a few years back. What are your thoughts on bringing in Jeff Teague?
Well, the reason that he's up for, in these trade discussions, or the reason that it would make sense from the Minnesota side, of course, is because now you have Derrick Rose, like it or not, has been voted in as an all-star. Has been
looking like he will be.
He's in the top, right? It's unlikely he's going to slip out. He's a cool story, but certainly not deserving, in my opinion.
I don't know. I think you could debate him being an all-star. Maybe not a starter.
No, you can't debate him being an all-star.
Derrick Rose has been very good this season.
If you look at guards in the West, you cannot put Derrick Rose in. But either way, this is a different conversation to have. But that's the reason he's playing well. And Tyus Jones is playing well. Jeff Teague is kind of slipping out into the end of the conversation there. That's the reason that he could be up. But that contract to me is just not appealing. And I don't think that if you're making the comment that JJ Barea and Fred VanVleet have similar games, I would argue that Jeff Teague probably has a similar game to Fred VanVleet as well. Of course, more experience in the league, maybe a little bit more athletic, but I like the leadership of Fred, right? And if Jeff Teague was the same leader that Fred is, then he wouldn't be getting pushed out by Derrick Rose and Tyus Jones.
Yeah, well, the thing about Jeff Teague, I think he'd be playable with Fred VanVleet because he's not a miniature guy and he can hold his own on the defensive side. Jeff Teague is kind of what we wanted for DeLon Wright. DeLon Wright... Because Jeff Teague averages 12 points per game and 8 assists, 8 to 8.5. So he's a good facilitator as well. DeLon Wright can get to the rim and do these sorts of things, but he's really struggled in, running an offense. And I think that's what the Raptors are looking for. Maybe DeLon has some more smoother moves and he's a few years younger. So, there's to that comparison, you can maybe make some pros for DeLon. But what we need, a playmaker, that's what the Raptors are in the market for. I think Jeff Teague could make sense on the Toronto Raptors roster.
Would you get rid of Norman Powell? Obviously, this is not the exact trade, but would you get rid of Norman Powell and DeLon to receive just Jeff Teague?
See, that's the issue. Player-wise, I think Jeff Teague would make sense as our backup shooting guard or backup point, whatever you want to run him as, with whatever Nick Nurse decides. I think he could make sense within the team, within the roster, but Jeff Teague is making, for the next 2 years, is making about $17 million per year. And realistically, I don't see a trade where, because we have some valuable guys on bigger contracts.
$19 million in this next year. Next year.
Yeah, exactly. Big money for Jeff Teague. So if we were to make a trade work out, we'd end up having to give up a guy like Norm, who's been awesome as of late. If we throw in CJ Miles and DeLon Wright, that won't cut it. on its own. So there'd have to be some trade. Masai would have to pull some strings and figure out a big deal to get Jeff Teague. So I'm not sure he's worth it, in my opinion.
No, we'd have to really explore what the options are, and I think either way you're getting rid of you have to. That's for certain. You have to get rid of a Serge or a Norm or even a Jonas, somebody who has value, and I don't see how a big man would make sense going to Minnesota either, given they just acquired, Saric, and they still have Gorgie Dang, who's playing well for them. Anyways, it's probably a very unlikely trade. The last one, though, that you're saying that this is the most likely or the most ideal one for you.
The one I'm most intrigued by, and it's Jeremy Lin. Because Jeremy Lin is, he's bounced around team after team after team. And people have kind of forgotten about him the past 2 years because he's been riddled with injuries. But this season...
Horrific injuries.
Yeah, awful injuries. And, this season he's been kind of thrown to the bench because the Hawks are tanking. They're not worried about bringing in a veteran guy, playing him a lot of minutes and winning games. So Jeremy Lin's kind of been pushed aside. But when he's been on the court, he's been very effective. He's averaging 11 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds. But if you look at his prior seasons, and especially looking back at how he played his last fully healthy season with the Charlotte Hornets, he was an absolute beast for them, running with Kemba Walker. I'm not sure if you remember that 2016 year where they took the Miami Heat to 7 games. Jeremy Lin was running the 2, and he did exactly what we need. Because he ran the 2 alongside Kemba Walker. He proved he can play off the ball but still be a creator, and he's traditionally a point guard. So if, Lowry's out for a few games and Fred's running the starting point guard, he could easily step in, and facilitate the Toronto Raptors bench offense, which is an area when Fred's not been with the mob, when he's been in the starting lineup, they've struggled greatly this year.
Right. Now, you do make a point, though. Okay, because what you're saying is centered around basically getting rid of DeLon, right? You're saying we can run Fred and Jeremy Lin together.
Yep.
And the criticism is that Fred, as the next up, right, in replacement to Kyle Lowry, is the reason that the Raptors are losing games. So not specifically the onus is not on Fred, but it's saying that without a playmaker in the absence of Lowry, the Toronto Raptors can't win as many games, and Fred is that guy, and they can't win games vis-a-vis Fred VanVleet. But is this it for you? DeLon Wright is the guy that's going, or could Fred also be a guy that we're willing to package up and ship away?
Well, Fred's shown that he's capable of facilitating an offense. For a stretch there this season, he's struggled a little bit, but especially the past couple weeks now, I think a lot of Fred's struggles are behind him. He had 1 or 2 bad games recently, but for the past month, Fred has been very solid. He's been scoring the ball. He's been facilitating. I know people get on him about dribbling a bit too much, but I don't think that's a huge issue. He's not as bad as Corey Joseph, and we saw point guards in the past like Jason Kidd and Steve Nash dribble the ball a lot. So I don't think it's a there's many downsides to Fred. I love Fred much more than DeLon, especially this season. I think his value and his upside, he's definitely the guy I'd want to keep long term over DeLon. So yeah, if we're trading, one of our backup guards, I think DeLon would have to be in the move. But Jeremy Lin's contract is a 1-year, $13 million deal, so you might have to add in CJ or another bigger contract to bring in Jeremy Lin.
Now, there's a couple parts about this that would make sense. My initial reaction is Jeremy Lin, you're only getting him for 1 year. Not even that you'd want him for more than 1 year. He's a guy that had a lot of bad injuries. He's a guy that's never been
But if he's healthy, I wouldn't mind bringing him back.
He's a guy that's never been a great player in the league. He's always had these freaky stretches of Linsanity moments, and I haven't been following up on him, extensively, but he's also 30. He's not in his youth anymore. But if you look deeper into the numbers, he is the most effective and efficient player out of Fred VanVleet and DeLon Wright. He's playing less minutes than the both, I believe. Yeah, he's playing less minutes than both. He has a better effective field goal percentage. He has a way better player efficiency rating. Both of the Toronto players are below average, and his stats better than both, except for in the assist category. I think Fred is, he's doing about an assist better, but he's playing on about 8 minutes more per game. So, I was initially going to give you a kind of a harsh rebuttal, but any good argument is based on facts, right? And you can shut me down with the facts here. By rights, Jeremy Lin is the better player, but now it's come down to, the little intangible things. Do you think Jeremy Lin would actually be a better fit? He's not an athletic guy. Would he actually be a better fit than either of the 2 guards that we currently have coming off the bench for the Toronto Raptors?
I really like Fred VanVleet's game. I think he does a solid job of running the offense, despite some people, I just mentioned it, he dribbles the ball a bit too much, but, he does the similar things that Lowry does, and he's a phenomenal defender, and he's very confident in taking those big shots, and he does it at the end of games. Fred has a lot of those things that don't necessarily show up on the box score, and at the beginning of the year, we were very frustrated because those weren't, he wasn't really capitalizing on those skills that we know he had from last season, but the past month, he's shown that he's back to being steady Freddy, so I think there's a lot more tangibles that goes into Fred VanVleet's game, but I'm very high on Jeremy Lin as well. I think he could come in and provide different things that Fred is capable of doing. I think Jeremy Lin's, despite his lower scoring average this season, he's capable of going off on certain nights. He can facilitate. He can do all sorts of things too. I think two of those guys on our bench together.
It's also hard. It's also hard to score on the Atlanta Hawks. This is the worst team. One of the worst teams in the entire league. They have one of the least amounts of depth. They really don't have any player to challenge defenders. So you put them in a situation where everybody can kind of create for their own. It's the Toronto Raptors, so you don't have to explain that. He might have opportunities to be able to score more, at least set up plays. Anyways, we're going a bit long here. Let us know what you think. You can finish it up, Ben, but definitely some interesting points of consideration. And will something happen? I don't know. It's like you said, the Lorenzo Brown, we'll have a video about that. It'll probably show up before this video, but could be an indication that moves are being made.
Yeah, for sure. The Raptors have cut Lorenzo Brown. They're in the market for a playmaker, so maybe Masai has something up his sleeve. Let us know what you guys think, what type of player that you want, if it's one of the guys we listed or someone that's not been reported or been rumbled about. You never know with Masai Ujiri. He's always got something cooking. Anyways, you're the best for making it this far. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. We love hearing your comments. We got the new comment of the day segment going into our post-game reaction, so be sure to leave comments on every video on our Instagram profile, on our Twitter, all that sort of stuff. We're keeping that scoped out, so anyways, you guys are the best.
Cheers.